While I hope I've done a good enough job advertising this channel as a place where I can talk about whatever the heck I want, because for I think the first time ever, we're talking about something completely unrelated to video games, Murder Drones, an animated series here on YouTube created by Liam Vickers and Glitch Productions. If you haven't seen it and still clicked on this video anyway, go do it literally right now because there will be all the spoilers ahead, and it's only just over 2 hours in total length so far anyway. And by so far, I mean after Season 1, Episode 6, with 2 more episodes yet this season set to come out spring 2024. I was originally going to wait until after Episode 7 came out to make this video so that I could explain everything that we know before the season finale, but the recent trailer made it look like 7 and 8 are going to be more of a 2-part finale, and it's going to be a while before 7 comes out anyway, so I figured why the heck not just do it now. So, in this video, I am going to be explaining in great detail and in chronological order every single thing we know about the story and lore of Murder Drones, as well as trying to make it clear exactly what we don't know yet. See, there are lots of tiny details in this series that are definitely hinting at something, but there are just many different interpretations and theories about exactly what. And I will be going over some of these existing theories, most of which are not my own, but have come from various places on YouTube. I've watched a lot of Murder Drones theory videos, so I'm not going to be able to remember exactly who had what theory, sorry about that, but some of the channels I've watched are Cartoon Universe, Camille's Harem, Rem Games, Lore Drone, and maybe some others, so a lot of them probably come from there. Oh, and the one film theory, of course. Hi, Future Phil here, just for a second, just wanted to let you know that this whole video was written and recorded before Lore Drone's latest video came out, the one on a bunch of currently unanswered questions from throughout the series. It's a really good video. You guys should go check that out. It has a bunch of stuff that that I probably would have mentioned in this video if it had come out as I was writing it or something. So yeah, you should definitely go check that video out after you watch this one. It's really good. Alright, enough of my ramblings. Let's start at the beginning with the creation of the worker drones. We begin somewhere in the late 2900s to early 3000s, a time when humans had found a way to travel to planets outside of our solar system and begin mining them for resources. To help with this process, an interstellar company called
JC Jensen in space
creates worker drones, autonomous robots with AI advanced enough that they can eventually learn to act and even feel basically human. Some humans don't treat them this way though. Enter James and Louisa Elliott, super rich snobs who live in this huge creepy manor. Some have speculated that they're higher-ups in JC Jensen, but that's not confirmed anywhere. The only evidence for this is that they're rich, and a company big enough to exist in several solar systems would be able to make them so. And also there's this line from Jay later on.
Sorry, boss. Corporate spoken.
But like, that's just how she talks, so I wouldn't call that great evidence. But yeah, they buy a bunch of drones to help take care of the house and such, but are willing to destroy them at a moment's notice if they do the tiniest thing wrong, since they can always buy more, of course.
Western Villa style? Were you programmed by beasts?
But see, improperly disposing of drones like this is actually not a great idea, and in fact is punishable by law, though of course the rich Elliots get away with it. But what is the proper way to dispose of the drones, and why is it so important to do it right? Well, we learned this through a JC Jensen training tape. Yeah, as in a VHS tape. In the 31st century, for some reason. Anyway, the first step for proper disassembly is to put a marked for disassembly armband on the drone. This is actually really important for our purposes because these armbands contain the drone's product number, which marks the model or series that the drone belongs to, as well as the serial number, which is unique to each drone. Yes, I know those two terms sound backwards, but that's the way it is. The next step is to upload a program into the drone called WDOS_606, or Worker Drone Operating System 606, which terminates the drone's core, basically acting like a virus and killing the drone. But that's not all, because then the hardware needs to be disassembled as well. First, the core must be disconnected. Then finally, the drone and core have to be put through a special drone disassembly unit. If the hardware is not fully taken care of, there is around a 0.01% chance that a dead drone can actually reject the WDOS-606 at any point up to 5 years later and come back to life, becoming a quote-unquote zombie drone, which is just a name. They don't actually act like zombies, just like their old selves. Most of the time, anyway. The tape doesn't really mention what happens if the destroyed drones are never given the WDOS-606 in the first place, so either that means that it basically ends up the same, or that the Elliots actually took the time to upload it into all the drones they destroyed, and I'm honestly not sure which one of those two options seems more likely to me. Anyway, with these zombie drones, there's a 70.3% chance that they'll just act normal, a 29% chance that they'll experience something called terminal lockout, which I don't actually know what that is. If it's some sort of actual technological term, please let me know. And a 0.7% chance of potentially hazardous mutations. More on that later. So naturally, throwing out so many drones without proper disposal would mean that the Elliots have at least a few zombie drones on their hands. Enter James and Louisa's preteen or possibly young teen daughter, Tessa. Tessa's parents don't treat her very well, often chaining her up in her room as a punishment, and not really allowing her to have any social interaction whatsoever. Also, she has these weird occult-esque drawings in her room, and I have no idea if that will ever actually be important, but hey, it could be. But when the zombie drones start appearing in the family's dump, Tessa starts taking them in, fixing them, naming them after the first letter of their unique serial number, giving them wigs,
And where's she getting the hair to play dress-up with them? Creepy.
and treating them as friends. Though they also work as maids and butlers in the Elliot Manor, so it's possible that Tessa's parents only let Tessa keep the drones if they continued to work as servants. Tessa had 3 zombie drones in particular that we know of before the plot really started to get underway. First is Jay, who seems to be the most loyal drone to Tessa and really likes talking using corporate buzzwords for some reason. She's not overly fond of Tessa's other drones and likes bossing them around. Then there's N, who seems to be Tessa's favorite and is also too pure for this world. But you already knew that. And finally there's V, who we don't see a whole lot of during this period, but she seems nice and sweet. Also, at some point, she begins to form feelings for N, which he ends up reciprocating. It's also worth noting that all 3 of them share the same product number, CYNMYKX. Well, maybe. We know that at least J and N eventually have this PN, because the only clear looks at any of their armbands we get happen way in the future from now. But at that point, they actually have slightly modified armbands, and plus they've all gone through major renovations by then, maybe even enough to warrant a new PN? I know that the first 3 letters of that PN that I just mentioned are making some of you think that it must have been a later development, but I'll explain in a bit why that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, maybe. It's unclear just how many other drones besides these 3 Tessa had before shows up, but it is interesting to note that we see one and only one other drone with the same style wig as the others in the background during the flashbacks to the Elliot Manor. Even in the episode 5 teaser, I'm pretty sure this one is just V. I also thought that the gap in this picture from that teaser might be for this drone, which I guess is still possible, but then I realized that Mr. Elliot is actually supposed to be there, which is weird in and of itself, but I digress. So it's possible that this could be a character that becomes important at some point, but it's also possible that Tessa has a bunch more drones we don't know about and this is just the only one we see. But we do know of one more drone that Tessa takes in. This drone had been dead for quite a while, as we can see from how deep they're buried in the pile of robot corpses. We also see their armband, the text of which has faded quite a bit, so much so that the serial number and all but the first 3 letters of the product number are not quite legible. Those first 3 letters? CYN. Yes, something called Sin existed even this early in the timeline, and this, plus this tiny glimpse we get in episode 1, make me wonder if Sin was an admin program present in all worker drones, or at least this specific line of them, but it is still possible that this admin thing was added to them later. I do have some direct evidence for this that we'll go over way later in this video. It also might be worth noting that what little we can see of the last 4 letters of this drone's PN shows that it's not the exact same model as J, N, and V. So, this drone wakes up as a zombie drone like the others. But hey, remember that 0.7% chance for a potentially hazardous mutation to occur in these zombies? Yep, well, that happens. In the first few split seconds that this drone comes back to life, some very hard to read code and sentences appear on its screen. Most noteworthy is the phrase, "I will not discard you," the word absolute, and then access, yes, no. The best theory I've heard explaining this jumbled mess is that it's supposed to be something asking the drone for permission to take it over. But what something might that be? Well, that would be the absolute solver. And what is the absolute solver? Well, we still don't really exactly know yet. So let's go over what we do know.
We know it mutates in damaged AI.
Yes, thanks for the very vague statement there, Tessa. Assuming that she both knows what she's talking about and is telling the truth, neither of which are guaranteed, by the way, I see this meaning one of two things. One is the interpretation that most people seem to immediately jump to, that the absolute solver itself is the mutation.
So you are a program?
And the second is that the absolute solver is something from outside that takes damaged AI as a host and mutates inside of it, maybe some sort of alien or demon.
More like you are our cute puppets.
That second one may seem like a stretch at first, but when we actually look at some of this thing's properties, it suddenly becomes a lot more likely in my mind. First, there is another line from Tessa saying that the solver took our currently unnamed zombie drone as a host, but again, who knows how accurate any information we get from her is. But it's the solver's powers that really make things interesting. It can manipulate code, as you might expect, but it can also manipulate matter in general, giving its host telekinetic abilities and even teleportation. Even crazier is that it can seemingly turn inorganic material organic, which I personally think should not be possible for a simple mutated AI. Also among this thing's otherworldly powers is the ability to create black holes, which also seem to sometimes leave behind a bloody organic mess, and the ability to seemingly generate large amounts of both organic and inorganic material out of very little, though not out of nothing, as we see this regeneration does have a limit. But at the same time, we know that the solver is at least partially code-based, so depending on how far Liam ends up taking the parallels with one of his previous works, Internetian Cube, it could end up being some sort of weird mixture of something technological and something demonic.
The devil is a lying, conniving manipulator. Any innocence or humanity you see in the Origin Cube is a perverse disguise born of the mountains of corpses it's consumed.
The absolute solver does have a weakness though, heat. So much so that its hosts can't even walk out in sunlight. So back to the actual events of the story. Tessa finds and takes in this solver-infected drone, and since she can't see its serial number at all, she names it Sin after the first 3 letters in the product number. Oh, I suppose I should also clarify that we see multiple solver-infected drones throughout the series, but Sin is the only, I guess, naturally occurring one that we see, and is also the only one who is completely controlled by the solver and not fighting for control at all. Though some people do wonder if this drone's old consciousness does still exist somewhere deep down and may resurface at some point. And if Sin was the only naturally occurring instance of the absolute solver that has ever happened, that would mean that all strains of the absolute solver that we see throughout the series come from her, which would make it make more sense whenever the characters just refer to the absolute solver as Sin in the future, something which I will also be doing at points throughout this section. Anyway, the solver doesn't quite know how to act normal, causing the other drones to kind of not like her very much. Except of course for Pure Boy N, who treats Sin like a little sister. Even Tessa seems uneasy around her though, often locking her in the basement. And Sin gets up to some stuff down in that basement. See, the absolute solver isn't content to just live as someone's drone pet. It has plans. Which, of course, we don't know what the end goals of those plans are at all, but we have a few hints. First of all, its full self-given title.
The solver of the absolute fabric, the void, the exponential end.
Honestly, I have no idea what those last 2 things could mean, but solver of the absolute fabric, huh? That sounds to me like it wants to solve the fabric of reality, whatever that means. There's also a brief mention of something called the singularity, which people have speculated could be a part of the solver's end goals. One of the definitions of singularity from Oxford Dictionary is a hypothetical moment in time when artificial intelligence and other technologies have become so advanced that humanity undergoes a dramatic and irreversible change. That would definitely fit with the vibe of the show, so Or it could just be referring to the center of a black hole with the solver having black hole powers, I don't know. Or both. But in the meantime, Sin starts doing something to the other drones in the manor. We're still unsure exactly what happened during this time, but here's what we know. We see mangled versions of J and V, specifically them and not anyone else, down in Sin's basement. And there's an N body too, but he looks pretty normal besides just having his head cut off. But we can also be pretty sure that normal working versions of all three of them were living up in the manor like normal. Based on future events, we know that the organic wings, teeth, and tails sprouting from the ones in the basement are a result of them being taken over by the Absolute Solver. Besides that, it also looks like Sin has been building mechanical replacements for those organic wings and tails. Again, except for N's body, which I don't know if that's an important distinction or if it's just in a different stage of whatever experiment Sin is doing. So Sin must have made clones of the three of them then, so that Tessa wouldn't notice anything weird going on, maybe? Also, the Solver has been building a new body of sorts for itself, made out of tentacles, these weird crab claw-like things, and these security camera-looking things that are capable of projecting lifelike holograms. As all that is going on, many of the drones in the manor for some reason end up unresponsive with a 606 error and a yellow X, a symbol that is probably related to the Absolute Solver in some way, on their screens. This might be the terminal lockout thing that was mentioned in the Zombie Drones tape, but definitely don't quote me on that. Lore Drone has an excellent video that goes into some technical explanations of what might be happening here with the 606 error and the X, but a lot of it seems like pure speculation, so I'll just leave a link to it in the description and call that good for now. Among these unresponsive drones are the currently operable version of V, and our other friend with the blonde wig who may or may not be important. Now, we finally get to a point where we have a much better idea of what actually happened. Probably. See, this section is shown to us through memories that are being actively tampered with. But those memories belong to N and V specifically, so I think it's at least safe to say that any scene we were shown that they weren't in was something that actually happened. Plus, I'm of the opinion that basically everything we see happen to N and V before a certain crow shows up also did actually happen. The night when it all goes wrong, the Elliots are preparing to host a big gala, you know, rich people stuff. Sin convinces Big Bro N to go invade the preparations to ask Tessa if they can go to the gala, which ends with Sin mouthing off to Tessa's mom and taking the blame for it, getting tied up to a pole and eaten by crows and probably dying. This body of his anyway. Plus, Tessa gets blamed for her
Dumpster pits.
showing up in the first place and gets chained up in her room. Oh, and Jay's there too because she seems to hardly ever leave Tessa's side. Except for that one time. But now is finally time for the Absolute Solver to begin enacting its plan for universe domination or something. It takes control of all the drones in the manor, including taking over Jay on the spot, and murders everyone at the gala. Except for Tessa.
You will not have to discard your pets, and I will not discard you.
We don't know exactly why Tessa is spared. She didn't seem to like Sin very much, so I doubt it's something like Sin spared her because Tessa treated her better. Plus, there's the repetition of that line, "I will not discard you," that we also saw when Sin first woke up. I would guess that the Solver needs Tessa for something in the future, but what that could be, I don't know. Also, maybe N didn't actually die like I thought he did, or maybe Sin activates a new body of his now, because he definitely seems to remember glimpses of the destruction of the manor later on. Oh, we're done with the part told through memories now, by the way. Which means that we're now to the super long part that is told to us entirely through people who could be lying, people who might be misinformed, footage that could be doctored, or is otherwise complete speculation. This is gonna be fun. So, here's what we're told happens. The probable first thing is that the Absolute Solver destroys the entire Earth. Except, unless the Tessa we see in the present events of the series is just some puppet of the Absolute Solver like some have theorized, Tessa is not on Earth when this happens. Or at least I would assume, because I'm guessing you couldn't survive whatever this is. She has actually gone to work for JC Jensen as a technician, or at least does eventually. And that's really all we hear about Tessa's doings for a while. JC Jensen itself, on the other hand, is pretty busy during this time. Specifically, they're doing that thing that humanity tends to do where they look at something powerful enough to destroy an entire planet, and instead of doing everything they can do to destroy it, they're like, but what if we learn to use it for our own purposes? So they start studying the Absolute Solver's code, which I would assume means they have possession of Sin's body now, and spreading it to various exoplanets. The exact motive behind this and basically everything else JC Jensen supposedly does from this point forward has to be called into question, because many have wondered whether the company is for some reason working with the Absolute Solver, the Solver has taken over the company, or even the Solver is working by itself, but the characters mistakenly attribute some of its actions to the company. Like I said, almost everything we think we know about what happens in this era has to be taken with a grain of salt. The thing about the Solver being spread to other planets, though, that we know for sure. We now turn our attention to the exoplanet Copper-9 for the remainder of this video. While Copper-9's worker drones continue away at their job mining resources, the humans get to work experimenting with the Absolute Solver in this place called Cabin Fever Labs. We don't know if this place was built specifically for the purpose of experimenting with the Absolute Solver or if it existed before that, but either way, this place is crazy. The main part of the labs where all the nefarious stuff happens is deep underground, and from the recent trailer it looks like it has this weird cathedral-like structure in it for some reason. But this is hidden by a big office-esque area closer to the surface, which is also hidden by a camp on the actual surface called Camp 98.7. Or I guess the idea that the office and camp are fronts for the actual lab might be something I'm making up, but I don't know what else they would be there for, so I'm sticking to it. Anyway, a decent number of worker drones work at Cabin Fever Labs, probably at least 100. Each of them are given a bracelet with a unique 3-digit ID number. Part of the experiments done here involve injecting Absolute Solver code into some of these worker drones. The two that we know of being 002 Nori and 048 Yeva, giving them access to Solver powers such as telekinesis, teleportation, regeneration, and even to some extent all the weirder stuff too. We don't know much about what these two were like, but it's interesting to note that in all the pictures we see of them, Nori looks confident and even cocky, while Yeva just looks very traumatized. We do know that the two of them, or at least Nori, began having visions of some of the Absolute Solver's future plans and making these creepy drawings of them. Oh, and the humans also have these dinosaur robot things called anti-drone sentinels down here. They have a flash beacon on their heads that boot loops any drone that looks into it, stunning them and allowing the sentinels to rip them to pieces. It's likely they were made in case the Solver-infected drones got too out of hand, but that's not confirmed. Okay, before we move on, let's take a moment to talk about a piece of paper. Yes, a single piece of paper that we find in Camp 98.7 later on in the series. Alongside some of those creepy drawings I just mentioned, there's a paper that seems to be marking a certain drone for disassembly, a drone with an SN starting with the letter S, and a PN starting with either the letters ISA or TSA. Now, this being the only drone we've seen to not have a PN starting with CYN is interesting enough, but if that does say TSA, then things get blown wide open because those letters could very likely be short for Tessa. But would that mean she built it from scratch or just modified it? Is this mysterious S that one unnamed drone from the manor? Probably not. What would one of Tessa's drones be doing here this early in the timeline? Why was it being marked for disassembly? Why was this piece of paper next to some of the creepy Solver drawings? Why are we even being shown this? Is this even important at all? I don't know. I'm just trying to cover all my bases here. Anyway, back to the plot. Now, the next event that we know about is something that has simply been referred to as the core collapse. All we know about it for sure is that something happened that wiped out all biological life on Copper-9. Except for the trees at Camp 98.7, cause gotta have that camp aesthetic, I guess. Oh, also, all the dogs had been evacuated off the planet beforehand, just in case something happened, so they're all fine. And it's possible that the collapse also affected the atmosphere and sent the planet into an unending winter, but that might just have been the planet's climate before that anyway, based on literally the first shot of the whole series. A lot of people jump to the conclusion that the core that this event refers to must be the core of the planet, but I kinda think a planet's core collapsing would look more like this than like this. And having the super specific effect of wiping out all biological life but not destroying anything else, to the point where human skin and organs got evaporated while their clothes were completely undamaged. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that this core must have been something man-made. Oh, and it's also very possible that Nori and Yeva's solver powers, or maybe even just Nori's, are what caused the collapse in the first place. Anyway, after all the humans are gone, Nori and Yeva escape from the labs out into Camp 98.7. They were probably the only ones to escape, since they apparently
Left us to die.
Yeah, any drone left in the labs would probably be destroyed by the anti-drone sentinels, which seem to have been set loose sometime around when the core collapse happened. At the camp, Nori and Yeva meet a bunch of other worker drones, including one named Khan Dorman. At this point, all the worker drones, presumably on the entire planet, decide that without any humans there, they're free to live out their lives exactly as humans did. Going to school, having occupations, falling in love. And in fact, Nori and Khan do end up falling in love and getting married. Yeva also gets married to this dude whose name we don't know. And then they even figured out a way to have kids, which Liam explained in detail in a Reddit AMA. Basically, the drones purposefully modified the machine that created them to make smaller, dumber baby versions of themselves called untrained neural networks, using copies of some of the code from both parents, which combine to create a new personality. Then, once the neural network has matured enough, it gets transferred to a normal worker drone body. The ways these AI learn and develop end up being very similar to humans because we want relatable characters even in our funny robot show. Anyway, Khan and Nori end up having a daughter named Uzi, while Yeva and her husband have a daughter named Doll, both of whom inherit absolute solver code from their mothers. If we assume that the two of them are around the same age as their classmates in the present of the show, then we can pinpoint this date to be between 3051 and 3053. Wait, they're supposed to be 18 to 20 in the series and they're still in high school? Maybe these AI actually age a bit slower than humans. Also, I just realized, all of the drones that existed on Copper 9 at the time of the core collapse and decided to live like humans probably jumped straight into adulthood, and maybe also all of the ones who wanted to fall in love and have kids did so at around the same time, maybe all within 2 years of each other? And if that's true, then that would explain why we don't see any kid drones outside of Uzi's age group at any point. Maybe there just aren't any. I don't know, just a random little mini theory for you. Throughout this whole time, though, Nori has continued making her creepy drawings, often accompanied by crazy-sounding ramblings.
Build doors against the coming sky demons. The singularity awakens. Look at this cool ass I can draw.
Khan completely ignores her warnings to build doors, a decision he would end up regretting once the quote-unquote sky demons actually arrived. Before that, though, we need to shift our attention back to JC Jensen and the Absolute Solver, and the creation of the disassembly drones. Or, well, we know that the Solver was the main one involved in this, and we're told that the company was also involved somehow, but honestly, we have no idea how true that is. The disassembly drones are mainly the Solver's project. Basically, the Solver has been working to perfect the design it had started working on back in the basement of the Elliott Manor. From what we can tell, any worker drone that gets taken over by the Absolute Solver grows organic wings and a tail, which the Solver then seems to be replacing with mechanical parts, specifically designed to massacre worker drones. The mechanical tail includes a stinger filled with nanite acid that will eat through a drone's body, though the disassembly drones are also given saliva that neutralizes the acid in case they accidentally stick themselves or each other. They also have their arms replaced with what look to be parts from those old drone disassembly units mentioned in the training tape, which the Solver now makes into multi-tools equipped with claws, swords, guns, etc. And these drones are also made taller for some reason. And remember, these are all Solver-infected drones, meaning they're weak to heat and are even prone to naturally overheating if they don't consume worker drone oil, giving them an incentive to kill. but something is holding them back from using the full extent of the Solver's powers. For example, they can regenerate lost limbs or even heads, but they can't use telekinesis or teleport. This may be the work of the administration sin that I talked about earlier, at least if my theory from earlier was wrong and this was something put into these drones while they were being modified. This has led some people to believe that the original consciousness of the drone we know as Sin might actually be fighting against the Absolute Solver, but like I alluded to earlier in the video, I actually have some evidence that this administrator program is directly linked to the Absolute Solver, which I'll get to later. But if that is the case, then why would the Absolute Solver be blocking its own abilities? Well, probably just so that the disassembly drones aren't too crazy OP, but we don't know for sure. Anyway, among these disassembly drones are clones of our old friends J, N, and V. I say clones because, well, first of all, N at least probably died during the flashback, and also because of this line.
Effective drones were cloned more.
Which, like, what does that even mean? Who cloned them? When were they cloned? Why were they cloned? How much were they cloned? What does effective even mean? Does Jay even know what she's talking about here, or is she making stuff up? I actually wondered for a little while whether all of the disassembly drones were clones of these three, since they're the only ones we see in Sin's old basement, but no, we see a bunch of disassembly drone corpses later on that include one with black hair, one with a hairstyle we've never seen, and hey, it's our other old friend from the manor. Rest in peace. Oh, and this is also when J, N, and V get those new armbands that I mentioned earlier, just so you know. Eventually, a little while after the Copper 9 core collapse, J, N, and V get sent as one of at least 2 disassembly drone teams to Copper 9 to eradicate the worker drones there. At least, that's what they think they're doing. The worker drones come to the conclusion that JC Jensen sent them because they
Didn't exactly love the concept of runaway AI.
But who knows how true that is. Not all of the disassembly drones even seem to know exactly why they're there. Jay, the team leader, is the one who has directly received orders which apparently came from Sin, who I personally think is synonymous with the Absolute Solver at this point, but some people might disagree, think of that what you will. Either way, these orders say to construct a giant spire out of worker drone corpses, and then to find and enter Cabin Fever Labs. That seems to be all that Jay is told, and it doesn't seem like she tells the other two about anything but building the corpse tower. Though she does mention this.
Worker drones are corrupted, and that's why the company sent us.
If she's right about this, is she referring to the Absolute Solver? Why would the Solver send drones to kill its own hosts? Were they just meant to find the Solver-infected drones and not kill them? Is the good Sin theory real? I'm just gonna leave that there and move on. Oh, also, we're told that sending the disassembly drones to the exoplanet is Sin's last known act before she disappears? But again, this is coming from Tessa, who many theorists in the community have a hard time trusting anything that she's saying right now. This whole time, the Absolute Solver has been messing with J, N, and V's memories from inside of them. We know that it has to be the Absolute Solver doing this and not the humans like they originally think, because N doesn't even remember piloting and crashing their spaceship onto the planet, and they've had no contact with humans since that point. But no matter how many times the three of them have been cloned, they all do still seem to have the memories of their time at the Elliott Manor buried deep inside them, and they eventually begin to resurface. We have no idea how much J remembers because of her limited screen time, and N only starts remembering things much later. V, on the other hand...
No! No! Please stop feeding my own eggshells in front of my family!
And yet, I still feel nothing.
Well, first of all, she has a completely different personality now for some reason. And though N still has feelings for her, she doesn't even remember him at all, or at least pretends not to for some reason. Her memories do seem to start coming back quicker than N's though, and though we don't know exactly when that starts or how much she ends up remembering, we know that she remembers something about Sin, and whatever it is, it freaks her out. Depending on how early the memories start coming back, it's possible that she does remember N the whole time, but pretends not to in order to distance herself from those memories, and even possibly to protect N from them. So, when the disassembly drones arrive on Copper 9, the worker drones are obviously completely unprepared and get absolutely massacred. Nori Dorman, for one, is stuck with one of the drone's nanite acid tails, and Khan is forced to put her out of her misery. Khan and his still infant daughter Uzi, along with Yeva and her family and many others, are able to escape this first wave of murders though. Well, technically we don't know that Nori died this early on, but it just makes sense to me narratively based on the next thing we know that Khan does, which is to organize the Worker Defense Force, or WDF, and build a construct with 3 massive doors that will, hopefully, keep the disassembly drones out and maybe keep this particular worker drone colony safe. But apparently, either the doors don't do a good enough job, maybe they fail several times and are upgraded each time or something, I don't know. Or Yeva and her family are just stupid and go outside for some reason, because several years later, V murders Yeva and her husband right in front of Doll, who managed to hide before V even noticed she was there. We see an absolute solver symbol flash in Doll's eye at this moment, possibly suggesting that this is when her solver powers first activate. Or it's possible that her mom had been teaching her to use them for a while now. Either way, she is fairly experienced with them by the time the series starts. But anyway, Doll then takes her parents' corpses home and keeps them, for some reason. Yeah, her mental state is not very good from this point forward. Oh, I didn't really mention this before, but all solver-infected drones also get that thing where they can easily overheat, so they can't go in the sun and they have to drink oil and stuff. That's not unique to the disassembly drones. So once Doll starts needing to drink the oil, she at least starts by getting it from these little robot cockroaches. Liam said in a recent interview that they were made as a sort of cleanup crew originally, basically an in-universe excuse to have robot bugs crawling around on robot corpses. But yeah, Doll does a pretty good job hiding her absolute solver from others, and it's at least a little while before she starts having to get oil from other worker drones. Eventually, several disassembly drone teams, maybe even all of them besides J, N, and V, are able to find the office space above Cabin Fever Labs, but as far as we know, all of them are ripped to pieces by the anti-drone sentinels before they can even find a way into the lab itself. 2 particular worker drones have managed to survive down here though, Alice and Bo. Alice has worked here since before the core collapse, but has gone a bit crazy since then. She's found a control panel that allows her to open and close all doors in the facility from a safe distance, allowing her to basically manipulate the Sentinel's movements. This is probably how she ends up surviving for so long, and she may even be the one responsible for the deaths of all the disassembly drones. She's even found out about the Absolute Solver's heat weakness, storing the disassembly drone's solver-corrupted cores in an oven to keep them passive. Bo, on the other hand, is actually an untrained neural network, one of those baby drones I mentioned earlier. It's unclear how he got down here or how long he's been down here. It has to have been after the core collapse, since baby drones didn't exist before then as far as we know, but it can't have been too recently since he seems to act quite a bit older than he looks. Guess Alice didn't bother finding him an older body to transfer to. She did give him a few modifications though. And now, finally, we fast forward to the year 3071. J, N, and V are still doing their thing, and are also basically still the same mental age as they were back in the Elliott Manor, probably due to all the memory tampering, which is around the same age as Uzi. This is a really important detail, trust me. Khan is basically the most famous drone in this colony, but has become quite the neglectful parent, loving his work more than his own daughter. Speaking of his daughter, Uzi is now a rebellious teen with
Crippling daddy issues.
She doesn't remember her mom, but wears her old 002 bracelet from Cabin Fever Labs as a choker. She has also become pretty skilled as both a hacker and a mechanic. She has these little circular device thingies that let her literally hack into other drones' consciousnesses. They hardly come up at all, so we don't know if she invented those herself or if those are just things that all drones have for some reason. But her latest invention is a super powerful laser gun that she calls a railgun, which she is going to use to get revenge for her mom's death and prove herself to her dad by destroying the disassembly drones, which at this point have become colloquially known as Murder Drones. Wow, 10 pages into the script and we've finally made it to the actual events of the series. Most of the plot should be pretty straightforward from here, but there are still some things that we'll need to look a bit deeper into. But for now, episode 1. Uzi somehow knows that the final part she needs for her gun could be found in the Murder Drone's lair inside the giant corpse tower, so she sneaks out to find it. Just as she does, N notices her and starts chasing her. Uzi then tests out her now operable laser gun on N, which does wonders, blowing his head to smithereens. He regenerates it, of course, but something goes wrong in the process, leaving him unable to remember the last 3 hours and unable to recognize Uzi as a worker drone. This is also the moment I've referred to a few times where Administration Sin blocks N's absolute solver string for some reason. So the two of them start talking. N tells Uzi about the 2 other disassembly drones and exactly why they're supposedly murdering everyone, and Uzi tells N that the company doesn't care about him and that she could help him fix their crashed spaceship so they could abandon their mission and leave Copper 9. This is probably when she first starts to get the idea to
Murder all humans.
the ones who supposedly sent the disassembly drones and are actually the root of her problems. But she pieces out as soon as J and V return. Jay soft reboots N with a slap, causing him to realize that Uzi was a worker drone and also carrying a dangerous weapon capable of hurting his crush V, so he runs after her to do his job and murder her. Unfortunately for Uzi, he catches up right before she's able to fully close the outermost door, allowing him to get inside the colony. He then murders a large portion of the WDF and is about to murder Uzi when Khan shows up. Uzi tells him to pick up her gun and shoot N, but Khan, being the coward that he is, shuts one of the inner doors between them, prioritizing his own life over Uzi's. He then goes to try to evacuate and hide as many people as he can, which he probably uses as justification for his actions, at least in his own head. But whatever the case, Uzi only sees that her own dad just left her to die. But this actually causes N to feel bad for her, and he even quickly hides her when J and V show up. Remembering what Uzi had told him earlier, N works up the courage to ask Jay if what they're doing is really worth it. Jay's response is to stick a little virus uploader thingy onto N that will kill him in a few minutes. Jay then follows V through the vents to find and murder more workers. With the 2 of them gone, Uzi comes out of hiding. She's decided that since the murder drones getting in was her mistake, she should be the one to fix it. But she can't get into the vents to get around the closed door without wings. So, after realizing that N also wants to fix his mistakes, she gets the virus thing off of him, saving his life, and the 2 of them team up to stop J and V. They catch up to them just as J and V are about to murder a whole group of drones, including Khan, Dahl, and a few other of Uzi's more popular classmates. A fight ensues, ending with Uzi blasting Jay's entire body with her gun, eviscerating it to the point where it's unable to regenerate, and N chaining up V off-screen. Also, during this fight is when Uzi's absolute solver begins to activate, although for now it only manifests as a symbol in her eye. But once the fight is over, Khan looks like he wants to say something to Uzi, but she immediately tells him off and banishes herself, deciding to go back to the Murder Drone's lair with N, who is now the closest thing she has to a friend. So they go back and chain V to the inside of the spaceship. Later, as Uzi declares her intent to fix up the spaceship and murder all humans, her absolute solver finally fully activates. Sometime probably not too long after this, Uzi somehow contacts Thad, a popular guy in her class who had seen N and Uzi defeat J and V, and asks him to bring her her gun, which she had accidentally left inside. He agrees because they had saved his life. And thank goodness that's all that happens between these 2 episodes, because I am not looking forward to trying to explain everything that happens between the next 2. But anyway, episode 2. Uzi has been living with N and a still chained up V for probably at least a few days. This is the point where N starts to regain his memories from his time at the Elliott Manor, by the way. And it's also possible that it's in between here and the end of the episode that V starts regaining her memories as well. But if that's the case and she hasn't regained any already, then the first few memories that she gets are likely way more traumatic than N's. Not much progress has been made on fixing the spaceship, but Uzi has other problems. Her absolute solver has begun showing itself, and she has no idea what it is or how to control it. But she's not the only one with active absolute solver. Back inside the colony, the solver in Jay's corpse, not having enough material to regenerate her body, fully activates, seeking worker drones to murder and assimilate. When Thad brings Uzi her gun, he also tells her and N about these recent disappearances and how it might have something to do with Jay's corpse. So the two of them decide to return and investigate. And the dude standing watch at the first door agrees to let N inside even though he's a murder drone because he gives him a cute drawing as an apology. And also probably because a bunch of people watched N save their lives not too long ago. After some searching, they encounter Jay's body, which the solver has transformed into a giant mess of organic and inorganic parts, equipped with projectors capable of creating lifelike holograms. Or as N and Uzi call it, a
Hollow spooky snake crab.
N and Uzi fight it, once again saving Thad's life in the process. But then the solver hits Uzi with a bunch of illusions, first taunting her with a hologram of her mom, then making her think that it had just ripped her dad in half, then pretending to be N and convincing her to hand over her laser gun, leaving her defenseless. But thankfully, the real N comes in and saves her, and the gun blows up, the heat from which kills the solver creature, or at least makes it turn into a black hole and retreat. Uzi's still shaken up over thinking her dad had just been killed, briefly extends that fear of whatever Jay had become toward the other murder drone in her midst, N, pushing him away. N returns to the lair, where we see that V has broken her chain, but is still pretending to be tied up for some reason. Probably something to do with her feelings for N that she's clearly hiding. Uzi, meanwhile, returns home, where she's at least glad to see that her dad is still alive, and begins creating her own little conspiracy board, trying to figure out what the absolute solver really is. Me too, Uzi, me too. But among the many things on her board, there are drawings Uzi made herself, which look eerily similar to the ones that her mother had made all those years ago. Whoo boy, here we go. Okay, so not long after this, Doll finally decides that she's going to enact her revenge on V for killing her parents. Maybe she finally feels like she's got enough of a handle on her solver powers to take on a murder drone or something, I don't know. But it's trying to unravel the exact intricacies of her plan to do so that are going to make this section difficult. And all the details of it are probably not even that important, but dang it, I'm going to try to explain it anyway. So first, Doll reveals her solver powers to her friend Lizzie, the most popular girl in school, and tells her about her plan, because the plan involves Lizzie sneaking out to the murder drone's lair and befriending V. I guess they knew that N wasn't murdering people anymore. They were there when N fought J and V after all, and figured that V was still chained up or something so Lizzie wouldn't instantly be killed. And this ends up working somehow, despite the fact that V is not actually chained up anymore. Maybe V thinks that if she kills someone, then N will find out that her chain's broken. Or maybe N was there when Lizzie first came, because he does seem to know her name out of nowhere later. But he's not there for all of it for some reason, because he definitely doesn't know what happens next, which is that Lizzie and V actually start hanging out, it looks like. Once again, all without N knowing about it, because it's all happening outside the spaceship, and N still thinks V is tied up this whole time. They even go inside the colony without anyone seeing V, I guess? Or are all these pictures photoshopped? Can you see why trying to figure this out is so annoying? But anyway, at least part of the reason V is going along with this is because at some point along the way, Lizzie invited her to the upcoming school prom, which V agrees to go to, figuring it would be a great place to kill a bunch of people. Unbeknownst to V, that's exactly what Doll wants. But while Lizzie and V's friendship may have started for personal gain on both sides, they also seem to start becoming genuine friends somewhere along the way, even if just the slightest bit. Also, somewhere along the way, Doll and Lizzie's plan comes to include killing Uzi for some reason. Part of me wonders if this was V's idea. We do know that she's afraid that if N hangs out with Uzi more, they'll do more searching into the absolute solver, which V doesn't want N to do.
Promise me you and that purple thing will stop prying into that stuff.
But then why wouldn't she just plan on killing Uzi herself once she got inside? Maybe she just wanted to be extra sure that the job got done? And why would Doll and Lizzie even care enough about V's grudges to add it to their plan? I don't know, guys, I'm sorry. Meanwhile, though, Doll has begun working on the other half of their plan. Make V prom queen, for some reason. Maybe she just wanted to distract V by catching her super off guard before attacking her? I mean, that's what ends up happening, so maybe. But the way Doll goes about this is by killing all the other candidates. And also a bunch of other people. And then stockpiling their oil. Yeah, that last part isn't part of her plan, but she's started eating people now. That was probably a very recent development though, since we don't hear about people going missing at all until episode 2, and we know who was to blame in that case. Okay, and that also means the actual episode has started now, thank goodness. It's probably been at least a few days since Uzi went back to her normal life now, I'd guess. She feels bad about what she said to En and has started to miss him a lot, a feeling which would soon start to turn into, actual feelings for him. Yeah, I told you that thing about their mental ages earlier would be important. On prom night, much to Uzi's dismay, her dad had found a dress for her even though she definitely was not even planning on going, and had even found classmates for her to go with. These classmates happened to be Lizzie and Doll, an arrangement that the two of them probably at least had some hand in orchestrating. The three of them go to Doll's house to get ready, but Uzi overhears the other two talking about how they're going to kill her and let in V, so she escapes. Meanwhile, V tries to get En to come with her to kill all the students at the prom. She doesn't tell him the whole plan, instead saying that Uzi would let them in and then they'd kill her. Yeah, great pitch there, V. Maybe she just can't fathom that En is actually friends with a worker drone. En refuses, so V drops the illusion of being chained up, chops his head off, and leaves, saying that this is
What's best for you, even if you hate me for it.
She really does not want him looking into their past. Once En's head grows back, he quickly flies after V, though not before changing into his prom outfit.
Dapper En.
On his way to the colony, he runs into Uzi, who somehow must have passed right by V without either of them seeing each other. After a bit of an awkward reunion, En breaks the ice by being just the bestest of boys, and the two of them go together to save prom from V. Except when they get there, instead of finding V killing everyone, they find her crowned prom queen and about to be attacked by Doll. Lizzie decides at the last second that she actually values her friendship with V more than her friendship with Doll. Or at least that's how I'm reading this line.
On second thought, you're way harder than Doll. Run, idiot!
But it's too late. Doll uses her solver powers to pin V in place, yeet Lizzie away, and start indiscriminately murdering a bunch of her other classmates for no reason. So En and Uzi now have to save V from Doll, much to Uzi's annoyance. Once En gets temporarily knocked out of the fight, Doll and Uzi fight one-on-one for a bit. Uzi doesn't know how to actually use her solver powers yet, but she's still able to hold her own since, to Doll's surprise, she can't use her own solver powers on Uzi directly. There's also this weird part where we see En and V off to the side slightly dismembered, but for some reason they have to manually replace their limbs instead of just growing them back. I've heard one theory that this is because the disassembly drones have some sort of restriction in place on their solver abilities that makes it so that a part that they lose has to be completely destroyed before they can grow it back. But I kinda don't think this is the case because we see En get his head chopped clean off earlier in this same episode, so I'll just have to give this scene the old But then En and Uzi have a super epic dance fight against Doll, though I'm not quite sure if En has actually started developing feelings for Uzi yet, but he definitely does eventually. Then V just straight up shoots Doll in the back of the head. This renders her unconscious for a while, but they don't realize that she can regenerate just like the murder drones. But before she does, Uzi grabs a bracelet off Doll that has the key to her house attached to it, and then she goes with En and V to see if she can find any more clues about the Absolute Solver there. Also, this bracelet happens to be Yeva's 048 ID from Cabin Fever Labs. Once inside, they see all the dead body parts and correctly assume that Doll had been eating people, just like a murder drone would. Soon after this realization, Uzi suddenly finds that she also has the urge to drink the oil, and licks some off her fingers without the others noticing. They also find a Cabin Fever Labs ID badge on Yeva's dead body, which, yes, is still there. Also, this is probably the moment when En fully drops his previous crush on V.
V, you kinda suck.
Yeah, I'm not doing okay.
Or maybe that's just me reading my own interpretation into this. Sorry, NV shippers. I just personally don't see any evidence of him having feelings for her at any point after this. But then Doll suddenly teleports into the room, telekinetically removes the bullet from her head, and shoots it straight at Uzi, whose absolute solver activates in that moment, stopping the bullet. Seeing that Uzi also has the solver, Doll takes pity on her and says that if she finds what she's looking for, she'll help Uzi too. Because, oh yeah, I guess Doll has also been looking for a way to get the absolute solver out of her or something this whole time, probably. But then she teleports out to who knows where. So I didn't really mention it, but there are 3 spaceships just like J, N, and V's that have been either in orbit around Copper 9 or have been coming towards it since at least the end of episode 1, and they choose now to land on the planet. 2 of them crash because the murder drones were actually purposefully not taught how to properly land them, another thing which I neglected to mention. Actually, we don't know for sure that it even was murder drones in those first 2. We know nothing about who it might have been, except that a teddy bear flies out of one of them. Which is weird because we haven't seen teddy bears associated with a single character in this series. Could it be S? Maybe, I don't know. But the 3rd one lands gracefully, and out jumps none other than Tessa Elliott, or at least someone or something claiming to be her, who is accompanied by a clone of Jay, the 2 of whom claim to be here to find and stop all instances of the Absolute Solver. Sometime probably literally right after this, Uzi returns home with Doll's bracelet, noticing the similarities between it and her choker. Either her dad notices it or Uzi outright asks him about it, but either way, Khan tells her about Camp 98.7 and how it has some connection to both Nori and Yeva. So Uzi decides to go there and investigate. But first she has to tell her teacher about it, I guess to ask for a day off of school or something. But then the teacher decides that the whole class should go as a field trip because he doesn't feel like teaching them. So Uzi gets N and V to dress as camp counselors and distract the others while she sneaks off to investigate. But before they leave for the camp, Uzi sneaks into Doll's house and bags some of the body parts lying around, just in case she starts craving the oil again. When they first arrive at the camp, the students are at first wary of the 2 murder drones, but accept them as soon as the 2 popular kids, Thad and Lizzie, voice their approval. Also, everyone is acting like they don't know who Uzi is, even though
everyone knows Khan's daughter,
because Uzi needs to feel extra alone this episode for her character arc. See, the fact that N and V are basically instantly popular with the class starts to make Uzi worry that N will just toss their friendship aside now that he can hang out with all these other people. A thought that starts making her overheat. While investigating a nearby building, Uzi finds a dead drone body, a bunch of drawings that look like the ones her mom made, that paper about S that I mentioned earlier, and a special little robo-roach that, while she doesn't realize it yet, is a key to the elevator that leads down to the deepest part of Cabin Fever Labs. Oh yeah, and she's using her solver powers this whole time. They've gotten a lot stronger since she stopped that bullet. Oh, and also Doll is just kind of stalking her this whole time, but doesn't actually do anything notable this episode. Uzi then takes the bug and goes back to tell N about what she found, but when she gets there, a classmate accidentally shoots an arrow at her, forcing her to use her solver powers to stop it. But when she does, they start going out of control and the arrow turns into this gooey, fleshy mess of organic tissue. This freaks V out, reminding her of Sin, and she tries to chase after Uzi with full intent to kill. But N stops her as Uzi runs back into the woods. The 2 of them then go off on their own to try to find Uzi, N to calm her down, V to kill her. N doesn't find her right away, instead first finding a strange control room that we still don't know much about, and interestingly, that zombie drone's training tape from forever ago. He takes it with him, but touching it gives him a flash of memories of the day Sin destroyed Elliott Manor, or maybe even destroyed Earth itself. It's hard to tell exactly what he's seeing here. Uzi, freaking out and overheating, gorges on the spare body parts she brought with her, but it's not enough. The solver takes over and she grows the trademark wings and tail, then begins picking off her classmates one by one. V finds her and they fight. Solver Uzi is about to kill V, when N steps in and snaps her out of it. The 2 have a heart-to-heart about their feelings, and N assures Uzi that he values their friendship, and he's not going to leave her, and that from now on, they're going to figure all of this crazy absolute solver stuff out together because communication is key for any relationship. I'm sorry, I just like them together a lot. Anyway, with the key bug and zombie drones tape in tow, Uzi, N, and V then return back home with the few remaining students. Which includes Thad and Lizzie, by the way, they're fine. When the teacher asks what happened to the other students, V actually says that it was her who killed them, covering for Uzi. She may still hate Uzi, but at the very least she can see that N cares about her a lot, and she wants him to be happy. Sometime not too long after, N and V suddenly pass out and the absolute solver inside them starts trying to permanently delete their memories of the Elliott Manor. It's not clear which of those 2 things causes the other or why it happens now. One theory I've heard is that they pass out because they overheat from not having eaten anyone lately, which then causes the solver to be able to affect their memories, but we don't know for sure. And by the way, Uzi's temporary solution to her own overheating problem is that she just has a little can of spare oil that she drinks out of now. Whatever the case, either N and V were at Uzi's house already when this happened, or she drags their limp bodies there so that she can hack into their consciousnesses and figure out what's wrong with them. Yeah, remember that thing I said she could do like 5.5 pages ago? Well, here it is. Through their memories, the three of them find out about the Elliots, Sin, the Gala massacre, and the creation of the prototype disassembly drones in the basement. But the Absolute Solver starts fighting back against Uzi's interference, attempting to fully delete N and V's operating systems just to make sure the memories are lost. Just as things are getting bad, Doll suddenly barges in and attempts to steal the key bug from Uzi. Uzi tries to resist at first, but then she considers the dire situation N and V are in, and decides to let Doll have the bug so she can help them instead. She gets back in their heads just in time and pulls them out, waking them up with all their memories intact. But something weird happens when she does. Let's look at that a bit more slowly. First, the error 606 on their screens gives way to an absolute solver symbol so forcefully that it cracks their screens. Then behind the symbol, we see the words admin sin override in yellow text inside a yellow box, yellow usually being associated with the absolute solver. Then the box and text change to purple, Uzi's color, and it basically says that it's assigning the admin role to the user DarkXWolf17, which is Uzi's username. Then the text changes to say scrubbing connection before, for a single frame, the solver symbol gets replaced with a warning symbol with a fatal error over it. Finally, the cracks in their screens fix themselves, and they wake up. So what could this mean? Well, what we can tell for sure is that Uzi made herself the administrator of N and V's operating systems, but exactly what that means depends on exactly what the Sin admin was doing before, which we still don't really know. Though it does seem in this case that the admin is being directly associated with the Absolute Solver, which puts a dent in my earlier theory that it might have existed before the solver was put into them. But if that's the case, then I'm still left wondering why it blocked N's Absolute Solver back in episode 1. But anyway, my theory is that Uzi was actually able to kill the Absolute Solver in them somehow, or at least severely weaken its connection to them. The reason I jumped straight to kill is because of that warning symbol with the fatal error. The warning symbol has often been associated with the Absolute Solver throughout the series, so I think it's the solver itself that's experiencing a fatal error here. But then, right after that, we see that N and V still have their regeneration powers, which we know comes from the Absolute Solver, so I'm not really sure. If anyone has any idea what the scrubbing connection line could mean, that might help us figure out what's going on here. With N and V now awake, the episode actually cuts away from them, but no! I'm convinced that something happens right here that we haven't seen yet, that we're going to see as a flashback at some point, because the very last thing we actually see of this scene is V threatening Uzi with a chainsaw, but then in the next episode she's totally cool with Uzi and even says that she trusts her. No! I refuse to believe that this mismatched characterization was an oopsie on the creator's part. I think something must happen here that makes V's opinion on Uzi turn around so suddenly. But it can't be some sort of epic bonding moment or anything either, because Uzi's opinion of V hasn't changed at all by next episode. But honestly, I think it might be something as simple as Uzi explaining to N and V exactly what she did by granting herself their admin rights. If it does have something to do with weakening their connection to the Absolute Solver, something that V seems to be super afraid of, then I can totally see V deciding, hey, maybe she isn't so bad after all. Anyway, now that we've spent 3/4 of a page covering 15 seconds of episode, let's cut back to Doll for a second. She's actually taking the key bug out to Tessa and Jay, who are still just hanging out here. She has some sort of deal with them that if she brings them the key bug, they'll take her with them to Cabin Fever Labs. Why she couldn't just go there herself, I'm not sure. Maybe she thought that they might get in her way and wanted to stay on their good side. And then suddenly Uzi and NV are there too. guess they decided to follow Doll somehow, even though she teleported. See, there's gotta be something in between there we haven't seen yet, I'm telling you. But that is actually where the 6th and most recent episode starts. After Tessa and N do a bit of catching up, Doll randomly decides that she doesn't want to work with them anymore, steals back the keybug, and goes down into the office space above Cabin Fever Labs on her own. I guess as soon as she saw V, she was like, nah, screw it, I'm not working with these people. I swear, trying to figure out why Doll does literally anything is one of the hardest things about this series. Oh cool, Uzi can summon her solver wings at will now, neat. And wait, I just realized, why doesn't Doll have wings and a tail by now? I don't know, just moving on. Tessa tells Jay to wait by the spaceship while she, NV, and Uzi follow Doll down into the office area, where they are all promptly captured by Alice and Bo. Yeah, remember them? Because they're still basically running the show down here. They have a hobby of cutting up drones for parts, I guess, that they use for things? I don't know, Alice is crazy, that's all you need to know. Tessa and N are able to escape when Bo is away, but Alice keeps a close eye on V and Uzi, sticking magnets all over Uzi to keep her from using her solver powers to escape. Tessa then finally tells N about the destruction of Earth and the spread of the Absolute Solver, and why all instances of it need to be destroyed at all costs. Then she gives N an ultimatum.
I'll need you to choose the universe over one little drone, N, before she's not herself anymore.
N needs to kill Uzi or doom the universe. After Bo tells Alice about the escapees, Alice decides to send the Sentinels after them. Desperate, Uzi pushes her solver powers to the limit to try and get out, but in doing so, ends up giving it more control than she was hoping for.
Oh, don't mind.
The solver destroys Alice's control panel with a black hole, causing the door to their room to open and leaving them vulnerable to the Sentinels. Then Uzi passes out. The Sentinels all rush away from Tessa and N to the newly opened door and kill Alice. Bo, in his final moments, decides to free V so she and Uzi can escape before getting eaten himself. V carries the unconscious Uzi back to Tessa and N, and after she wakes up, the four of them hide from the Sentinels, where N and Uzi have this adorable little conversation that I love because they're being open with their feelings again. And then once the Sentinels leave, they continue looking for Doll and the keybug, which they find basically right in front of them. Doll is frozen on the floor, appearing to have been boot looped by the Sentinels. They correctly assume that this is a trap set by Doll, but they cautiously approach anyway. Except for Tessa, who just goes and grabs the bug without a second thought. Also, N and Uzi hold hands for the first time, so I guess they're officially a thing now, yay! But then Doll gets up, revealing her boot looping was faked, activates the elevator down to the lab, then opens all the doors around them, setting the Sentinels loose on them, before she jumps down into the now open elevator shaft. I guess she just really doesn't want anyone following her. Unfortunately, that leaves our protagonists on the wrong side of the elevator, so Uzi tries to rip a hole in it with her solver powers, which allows the solver to temporarily take hold of her again, leaving Uzi in a constant fight for control with it. Tessa, N, and Uzi step into the elevator, but V stays behind to fend off the Sentinels. Then, after telling Uzi she trusts her, V cuts the elevator's wires, sending it plummeting into the shaft below. V's fate is, as of now, unknown. Oh, we're finally done. I was gonna do a short breakdown of the episode 7 and 8 trailer here, but no, I'm done. All I'll say is, it seems like instead of just choosing whether to kill Uzi or not all on his own, N is actually going to tell Uzi about everything and say that they'll figure it out together, which is exactly what I was hoping he'd do. Did I mention that I love them? Anyway, outro stuff, links in description. I've got a Twitter that I don't post on very often, a Discord server that's not very active, a Patreon that no one's joined yet where you can get your name at the end of videos and get videos early, and I might be streaming on Twitch sometimes. Okay, thanks for watching, bye.
Can you set me free?